Welcome to Owning It, Elena. This is our
Yeah.
platform at Sparks for empowering the women and really everyone that wants to find a way to build deeper and more meaningful connections, but also elevate our confidence, talk about the topics that are top of mind, particularly this time of year. And so this newsletter that's coming out, we're talking about negotiation and found that a lot of women are intimidated by even just initiating conversations about their needs. And so we're going to spend some time communicating what you want and come from a place of power and empathy. So, Elena, welcome to Owning It.
Thank you so much.
Well, I'm excited to hear your story. Why don't you just start with the basics? Tell me about, when and how you joined Sparks, and then we can go into some questions I have about this topic of you.
Yeah, sure. So I've been at Sparks 8 years. It's the longest place I've ever worked anywhere. So it's definitely home now. And I came to New York about 11 years ago from Doha. So I was in the Middle East for a bit and in Europe for a little bit. So half of my career was there, and then half of my career has been here in the US. I was working when I first came here on the Super Bowl. That was here in New York for a couple of years, which was so fun. But that ended, and I was kind of looking for a new opportunity. And one of my friends had actually met Scott Tardy, our CEO, through something totally unrelated to events. And he said, we're looking to open a New York office. And she recommended me. And within a couple of weeks, I was hired and started in the office here. So it's been
Those
a great
stories.
experience. Yeah.
It is. It's about relationships. But also clearly you had the talent. You brought that to the table and the experience, and why we wanted to reach out to you. And I already can tell from the journey that took you to New York. I can't wait to learn more. If there's a time where you can share with us where you had a personal win, a time where you spoke up, you advocated for something that you needed in this whole world of work-life integration. Maybe you had to prioritize something personal over work or vice versa. And, just tell me more about reflecting on that. Would you have done anything differently, or is there just some advice in how things turned out that you could share with other women listening?
Yeah, sure. The example I want to share is earlier on in my career. And I just mentioned Doha. I lived there for 2 years. And I was sent out there by my company in London. I was living there at the time. And I thought it was going to be one project for 6 months. I was going to have a great experience in this place. I had to look up on a map, had no idea where it was, and then move back to London. So it was just going to be a fun experience. Once we got out there, we realized there was a lot of opportunity to open an office, to build a team, to get a lot of work. So that 6 months turned into 2 years. And it was an exciting time in my career. I was young. I was given a lot of responsibility, opening an office, meeting new people. And I really wanted to prove myself. I thought it was a real opportunity for me and kind of could shape my career and kind of what I did next. But I was living the expat life. So I moved out there with coworkers. Work and personal was a little blurred. I was doing everything with my coworkers. I wasn't really meeting anyone outside of that group. We were all living in the same apartment building. It was just kind of all coworkers all the time. And so I didn't really realize until a year of being there that I was kind of getting emotionally and physically drained from not only the work and the culture there. It's a unique environment. Being a woman there is, a little more challenging,
Yes.
Especially with the kind of work that I was doing. And so, it was before I knew it, I was really feeling burnt out. And so I thought, okay, I need to negotiate giving myself a little more autonomy, a little more separation, find space in my crazy schedule. I was working pretty much 6 days a week out there, with the weekends being Friday, Saturday. And so, it was a lot of work, but I needed to find that space. But I also, didn't want it come off as if I couldn't handle it out there, especially because I was already
Trying to prove yourself. It's early in your career.
Yeah, early in my career. And also, I was being held back in certain ways by being a woman out there. Like I couldn't be given certain titles out there, like my male coworkers had to be. And so it was challenging from those perspectives too. So, I went to my boss and I advocated for a few simpler things like, okay, I really want to move to where like the Arabs live. I don't want to be in this expat bubble. So I moved across town in another apartment building, felt more like immersed in the culture. I wanted to see the country that I was living in, not just be in this expat bubble. I advocated for a car because I was being driven around the whole time. So I wanted to kind of have more autonomy with that. And the way I pitched that was thinking at it from the perspective of my employer. Not only, if I have these things, I will be happier and be better at work, but also we ended up branding the car with our company logo because we wanted to get awareness there. So I said, hey,
Yeah.
I'll drive this Mini Cooper around town. You get a lot of exposure.
Oh,
So
that's
that was
brilliant, Elena.
a bit of a win-win. Yeah. And so, the other thing going to those conversations, I trusted them to send me out to this country I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
And so, I wanted them to trust me that if I changed a few things, worked remotely a little bit more, got outside of Qatar a little bit more, that I could get my work done still and I could be as effective. Yeah. So, I learned a lot through that experience, and it's kind of changed my perception now of how I can be successful at work and also make time for the things that are important to me and not to be afraid of having those conversations if I need to.
Yeah, so much courage in that story. I'm blown away. It's also, we talked about how the timeliness of reflecting back on that with the FIFA Men's
World
World
Cup.
Cup playing in Qatar right now. And there's a lot of the news about, rights and equity. And so just imagining you live in that culture. I love what you said, just to recap, that you put the trust in your employer and you're willing to have the courage to go there and build this business. And you needed to, in return, ask for that trust and respect. I think that's extraordinary, especially, I mean, did you ever have any classes on negotiation, or is this just really
Oh,
like
no. Yeah.
mental mindset, right, of going into this?
Mental mindset. And, it was learning a lot of things being out there, you have to show a lot of confidence, even if you're not feeling confident, for people to take you seriously. And you have to have the biggest voice at the table sometimes. So, yeah, it was a formative couple years for me, and I'm so glad I had that experience. And there's so many things I love about that country too, and the culture. I mean, the people were so warm and they really wanted our expertise there and valued that expertise that we were bringing into the country. Yeah, but there were obviously some challenges too. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you also, like you said, you wanted to be immersed in this culture. You clearly had a lot of passion and commitment for your job, and to do it your best, you had to have those things for yourself: the recharging, the separation, the autonomy, the independence. So, I mean, if you were to break that down or just think about strategies now, fast forward, you live in New York City. I know the demands in your job. It's this time of year where there's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. What do you do right now to mentally check in with yourself about what you need? Any like kind of negotiation reflections right now to keep you in this space of continuing to advocate for yourself?
Yeah. I think I treat my personal life similarly to my work life, and that like it's just as important. So I schedule things and I make sure I've got plans and evenings. I'm getting out of the office at a reasonable time, and that I'm focusing on different parts of my life that are important to me, and really focusing versus trying to do it all. So, I'll go out to New Jersey and focus on my family for a period of time and seeing them, and then, traveling with my friends, and then, my self time and things I need to do to kind of be the best version of myself. So, yeah, I really just try and think of it as equal priorities. I put it on my calendar. I've got one calendar with everything on it. So, there's that. And then, yeah, I think also, I try in terms of strategies at work, I try and not let things go too long before I raise something that's bothering me, or I ask for something that I really need flexibility on, because I've found that if I let it go too long, it starts to affect my work. It starts to affect my attitude and my positivity. So I try and address things early on before they kind of
Yes.
really start getting to me.
Well, there's a science and data that backs up, that circumstance, which is that we do see signs. particularly with impending burnout, we know that, it affects our attitude and our relationships, our tone of voice, like how we regard other people. So, you've learned those signs so you don't get to the end of the line, right? You don't put yourself in that position where you haven't been with your friends, you haven't been with your family, you haven't done something for your well-being, or gotten out of the office and just walked around and like relished in the great city that you live in too. I mean, I think that that's really important. What would you say to other Sparks colleagues, particularly that with the client demanding roles, or any role, right? We feel the pressure of showing up for other people, like anything that you want them to really do to prioritize themselves this season?
This season, yeah. I think it's just trying to stick to your boundaries, like know what those are. You don't have to say yes to everything. And kind of having the confidence to stick to those. We've all been at Thanksgiving and Christmas, where families are asking you questions and there's things you just don't want to answer with some of those overbearing family members. So just kind of, protecting your space as much as you can and having the confidence to do that. And not trying to just do it all the time because it's impossible.
It is, right? And having it all wasn't ever supposed to be meant to say we have to do it all. And, we have to like ask for help, ask for space. I love that you said that about the awkwardness of this time of year. You're in like events with like coworkers or family members or even friends or, the supermarket, and people can get into these conversations around taboo subjects, and, it just can be awkward. And one of the things that we reinforce in the newsletter is this style of communication of compassionate connecting and really listening, and trying to come from a place where we're not thinking about what we're going to say next. We're kind of trying to understand what this person's trying to convey us. And most of the time, it's not even through their words, it's through non-verbal. So I bet that that's something, like having lived in so many different cultures and different parts of the world, that is really a part of like your toolbox in connecting with new people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, giving myself the time to really know the culture too. I've lived in 9 countries. I've worked in, sorry, my thing just went off. I worked in a lot of different environments. So it's learning to adapt to those and adapt my, my behavior, my conversational style. Some cultures you may be coming off as a little bit aggressive, so you have to kind of be in tune with the needs that others have, and also how others might react to you, and adapt your style. So it's hard to do, but I think it's really important when you're working in different cultures.
Yeah, I love that, to even just tie a bow on what you shared in your story about living and working in 9 countries. That's incredible, Elena. And the fact that, it is steering a conversation. If that's how we're talking about negotiation for owning it today, we want to feel like we're heard, and we want the other person to feel heard. And sometimes that means adapting. It doesn't mean changing or contorting ourselves to become something else, but it's kind of understanding the context and the culture, and know that ultimately that's going to allow for more meaningful and impactful, memorable conversations. Well, I hope you stick to those boundaries, Elena. You'll now be like the go-to for others. And I think just leading by example, right? Like putting yourself first, saying, I have time for this, I have time for that. That is an assertion of power, setting those boundaries. So I appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Of course. It was so good to see you.
Thank you.